speaking of like you're talking about adjudicating the whole as well as the nuance, it's already a pretty incredibly daunting task. But you had probably the most daunting task of the finals weekend of judging prelims in however many groups there are. I don't know, 30 or something. I had it
It was
open there.
almost 40. I think it was like
Uh,
30, 36 or
30,
something.
36. Yeah, there's 36. I just pulled up my Google Sheets here.
It's mind blowing
36
how you all
groups.
keep it straight
Um,
for that long of a period of time.
so that's a long day to get out there. And if you don't mind talking about it, there was a bit of controversy that people had with your results, but we talked a little bit off the air about how you came to it and how you felt in your heart of hearts that like this is the right decision. You said I think the words you used were agonized over like just making sure that you did what was right. So Boston, I think for sure won the 2022 summer lot hype, no doubt.
Yeah.
I would subscribe to that. I mean, I saw it firsthand.
Sure.
We
said
saw it in
here multiple
Atlanta.
times.
We saw it in Atlanta, and I would fight tooth and nail with anybody to say that in the lot, that's one of the best drum lines I've ever heard in my life. But obviously, it's a different game when you're in the lot versus when you're on the field. So kind of walk us through that. Like, you got to make these incredibly hard calls, not just that one, but the rest of the sheet as well. I'm sure that's just a daunting task.
It is. It's an incredibly long day. Probably the toughest single day of judging I've ever done. And I would also say that it's really, to me, it's astounding just how good everyone is. Like,
right.
I feel like that's why I do what I do as a judge, because I'm like such a huge drum corps nerd. Like, I just love it. And so to be out there with everyone, open class corps, I mean, everyone up and down the whole lineup is truly an honor for me. I mean, everyone was just absolutely exceptional. It is very challenging because the numbers management that comes into play, right? Like you do not want to have any obviously no bottom line ties, right? So bottom line tie meaning whatever the actual total, the overall score, we call that the bottom line. And then you also want to avoid subcaption ties at all costs. You want to avoid, and actually during championships, we actually have someone down there this year, and it was Brooke Basso, who is an amazing woman from Indianapolis that works with IPA, and so I know her from my judging with Indiana. But she actually sits on the field and like helps us. If she will alert us if we have a subcaption tie somewhere, just as an extra set of eyes to try to, just keep an eye out for any of those so that we're not tying people.
So just to pause real quick. So I think a lot of people, just to dive into the backside of it, like you do have the ability to go back and change numbers, which is 100% the way it should. Well, you kind of didn't as much as some others, but getting the numbers and the placements and the spreads right is 100% the most important goal. So if you got to go back and change a group after you've seen 4 or 5 groups, you absolutely should. So that is, I like that they have somebody down there being like, hey, you tied these groups, you need to make a call.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally you try not to change numbers if you can help it, because it's sort of, it can be like opening Pandora's box. Because like if you shift one number, then all of a sudden now they're tied with somebody else, and it can get out of hand in a hurry. I would say I have learned that lesson before. Luckily, not like at DCI championships, but I've had days. I did a show in Indiana maybe 8 or 9 years ago. I did like A-class prelims in Indiana, and there were like 50 A-class drum lines, and at the time. They didn't do any like rounds. It was just like one show. It wasn't like we're going to do 12 and then you can reuse numbers and then we're going to do another 12. It was like one show. And I think actually that was probably the hardest day of judging I've ever had in my life, trying to not tie people and just.
It's just like a random order of like skill level.
Yeah, it was absolutely brutal. And you're also trying to keep the spreads, because if you're familiar with the sheet, the spreads tell a story, right? So you're always trying to kind of convey a story to the groups through their numbers. You've got them profiled a certain way, and it's more common to see the content number a little higher, perhaps, and the achievement number a little lower. Like that's probably the more common way that you see it profiled, just because the membership is oftentimes like they're not quite achieving it perfectly. Well, no one is, but there's things they can improve, and so but the numbers are kind of connected. They don't like exist in a vacuum. So like somebody can't come out and play like Rite of Spring and play it really poorly and say, well, but the content number should be a 99 because it's the Rite of Spring. It's Stravinsky. Like it should be, you know what I mean? Like they're connected. The achievement and content numbers, they're derived from one another. So
yeah, I've heard a saying that they are like they're not a bar line, but they're a hyphen or something like that.
Yeah, so I always, in my mind, I just sort of view them as being like attached with a bungee cord. Like you're only going to really see so much separation in each one. But yeah, and the other challenge of quarterfinals day was that because the show is being broadcast in movie theaters, and because they want to announce scores throughout the day, we actually did have to lock numbers. Like every 6 to 8 groups, they would ask us to lock numbers. So once they're in there, they're in there. And so there were a few times like later in the show where there was a gap between groups where I had locked a core in, and if I could go back in time, maybe I would do something differently, with a group. But that's the reality. That's just a challenge of that day. It's a tough gig, and so you've got to be sure when you lock those numbers in. And I really felt like the day went quite well with my numbers management. I had one log jam with 2 groups where I had locked a number, and I would have liked to have maybe changed it, but it's not how it worked out. And where that happened, the cores were very competitive with one another. So in the end, I was actually very happy with how all the numbers kind of sorted themselves out, and really the show calls itself. Like I think about like, you ever heard about how like J.R.R. Tolkien, like he said, the world of Middle Earth already existed. I just brought it to the page. Like he just wrote it down. It always existed. He just was the one that wrote it down. And like, to me, like the scores exist. It's just my job. Like the show happens, and then it's my job to just distill all of that into those numbers that you see on the recap. But
yeah,
that's like my best interpretation of what happened throughout the day from someone that was on the field with the core, So
and you had to make some calls, and
yes,
I think you mentioned the Michael Jackson meme where you're sitting back and watching the popcorn. I'm sure you were watching with some popcorn and with extra salt as people started to, I don't know, grumble or question numbers that you put down for certain groups. But at the end of the day, like, you were the one out there on the field who heard what was going on. Specifically, everybody was, like I said, like Boston, like probably, I would say, a revolutionary battery ensemble that pushed the envelope of what you could ask a player to do. But as you said earlier, it should come down to the members, like Boston versus BD, not like Colin versus Skojo or versus this person versus that. So it's like it's got to come to fruition in front of you.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, some very and like I said earlier, I absolutely was agonizing over some of those numbers, and because I know what's at stake. I'm not immune to what's going on with the groups. I know where the hype train's headed. I'm not immune to all of that. I mean, I'm a fan too. I'm the biggest fan. That's why I'm out there. And so I know what people were saying, and but that's for me. That's just part of the gig. It's like I can't imagine being like an NFL official. Like blew that cut. So kind of what I felt like. But it's a tough gig. But I felt like in the end, the show kind of calls itself really. And that's what I think people don't realize is that I'm not just judging the battery, or I'm not just judging the front ensemble. I'm really trying to take all of it in, and I can tell you, and I think if you've heard any of my files, which I think you guys had said that you had heard some of them.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can tell I always am trying to be as authentic as I possibly can with the cores, and I think I hope that I come across as like a fan of the groups. Like I'm always rooting for the groups. Like I always want them to have the best run that they possibly can. I want them to make my job just torture. I want to have to really dig in and make those tough calls. And this year I think more than ever, in previous years maybe there's been a front runner or somebody that's kind of the obvious winner, and that goes all the way down. We talk about the top a lot, but there's so many of these interesting battles going on all throughout the placements.
100%.
I mean,
the 6 through 15 is
it's
brutal.
Just brutal.
Yeah, absolutely, just an absolute. I would say dogfight. Yeah, I mean, just so many intriguing matchups happening in groups. Some groups having hot nights, and for me, and that's the thing when you're out there too. It really is kind of astounding how you can tell, like what kind of a run a group is having just based on their energy. Some groups come out and like you can tell that maybe they had a rough day and it was hot and they're tired and they're just kind of mailing it in on autopilot. And then another group comes out. There are some files. There were some groups. I tell you, Genesis had a heck of a run. I mean, there were some lines that I actually found myself getting emotional on my files. I go back. Excuse me. I listen to them just extensively, which is almost torture in itself. But I go back and listen to every single one, and there's some. I'm like literally emotional because I can tell that the kids are putting it out. Like they are laying it out there. And is it perfect? No. They're giving up some stuff, but they are not going to go down without a fight. Like they were giving it absolutely everything. And when you get to be out there on the field with the group and they bring that energy, I don't care if they're first or if they're 15th or if they're 20th, when you get to experience that kind of energy from a DCI drum line, it's magic. I mean, it's like a drug. I am an addict to that. I have been chasing that kind of magic my whole marching career. And that's why you do it, right? And I can count on one hand the number, like you have just shows like, '08 Rhythm X, like finals week, there's like, you can count them, just like they don't happen that often, but, and that's why I do what I do for the Army. I mean, I'm sort of always chasing that feeling again as a performer. And it's hard. It's really hard to be a part of that. And so as a judge, that's about as close as I can get in the drum corps world to getting to be a part of it. And so just to be out there with them is just such a huge honor for me. I mean,
well, you kind of like segued the hell out of that. I mean, I'm not going to lie. And I really
could have set it up better.
I mean, I don't want to cut this short by any means, but so you're talking about like you're chasing this drug, you're chasing this feeling, and you obviously, and Mike and I have had these experiences as performers as well, and now you're having this experience as an adjudicator, but you're also through your career getting to experience this through your gig through the United States Army Old Guard Fife and Drum Corps, where you've had these incredible experiences as well, where you get to perform in these venues for these celebrities, for presidents, for prime ministers. What I know you said that Rhythm X 2018 is probably one of the pinnacles of your just like experience levels. But I think I've read that you've had some pretty unique experiences too, as well through your job. So, like, I'm not going to cut it short, but just kind of like take us through that and what that's been like as far as your career, but also your passion.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, having the chance to, to serve my country, to have a chance to continue to hone my craft as a rudimental drummer, I've been just really lucky to be a member of that group. And it's funny because it's like we do so many things, and what we do is such a unique thing. We play a lot of retirement ceremonies for the Army, which in some ways it's a little tedious, but in a lot of ways they're long and their speeches and all of that. But you're also essentially we're trying to showcase the excellence of the United States Army through our marching and maneuvering and our music. And so when someone puts in 20 or 30 years in a career with the Army, we do their retirement ceremony as a way to give back, as a way to acknowledge their service to their country. So we get to do high-profile jobs, dignitaries or heads of state that come in. I've played for the Pope. I did a job, a mission at the Kennedy Center a number of years ago where we played for the Kennedy Center Honors, and we were part of this skit that was honoring Tom Hanks. And so, like, Tom Hanks was there, and Sting, and President Obama was there, and I mean, obviously all these celebrities. And so we got to be a part of all of that and put that together. I played for the family of Winston Churchill in Statuary Hall inside the Capitol building. They dedicated a bust of Winston Churchill, and his like actual family was there.
That's incredible.
And so I got to meet them. I met Madeleine Albright that day. She has since passed away. So I get to do.
You played for the late Shinzo Abe.
Yeah, the late Shinzo Abe. I played for him at the White House. I still have the program for that. That was it's just so sad what happened to him,
right?
With his assassination. Just I was very shocked, especially in Japan too, where they're so strict about their gun laws. This guy like literally made his own gun. It's crazy, but all of that, I think, also. The flip side of that is we get to do things where we're playing for veterans, people who have combat injuries, who have lost limbs. We get to play for them as a way to honor their sacrifice. Sometimes we play at funerals and we play to honor the dead and the fallen. And sometimes we get to play for school kids, and for me, like, our uniforms are very unique, and I get to play this huge. It's a 17 by 20 inch rope drum. This thing is massive. Like
sound quality.
Yeah, we're talking a snare drum that's 20 inches deep. I'm telling you, this thing's huge. And when you see the look on a kid's face, you just never know what kind of a long-term impact you're going to have on someone. I know. I can think back to times when I was a kid and I saw drum lines and groups like that and just the impact that it's going to have on somebody. So, I do. I get emotional. Well, I played at a mission where we were playing for survivors of the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. And this was like 6 or 7 years ago. I don't know how many of those guys are even left around. They were old back then. But I got to meet them and talk with them, and it's really hard to kind of put into words. So, because I've always been sort of a military history buff, and have read quite a bit about our own country's history and the role of musicians in the military, and so it's kind of hard. And we do a lot of other Army kind of functions. It's not always just like a gravy train of like doing this awesome stuff. Sometimes like. Tomorrow, as I told you, I'm working a 24-hour desk shift. Not looking forward to that. So
the guts and the glamour.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, that's yeah. Speaking of guts, I mean, I was looking through some old just interviews that you had done, and one of the things that was on there was talking about some of the training, and you have to do like a 75-minute standing at attention
yeah.
training or something.
Yes, yeah, you do. So you do a 45, 60, and a 75, and you do a 30-minute one at the audition. So if you fall out in that 30-minute one at the audition, you just get cut right then. So luckily, no one, to my knowledge, no drummers have anyway. I know that there have been some fifers and buglers that have not made it through that, because it's weird. Like if you've never done it, to try to just like stand at attention for 30 minutes like without moving, it sucks. You know,
you get an itch on the end of your nose. You can't do anything about it. Like you're
mentally like thinking about like, all right, I'm gonna take myself back to like high school. What was that?
Exactly. Yeah, you come up with all these mental games for yourself. You know.
So when the fifers have to stand, do they have to stand like instrument in playing position?
No, they stand. They have like a kind of like a parade rest that they stand out.
Okay. I'm gonna have to use that with my high school kids when I go back to teach them.
Yeah.
So no.
Like, this guy stand at attention for 75 minutes.
You can do it for 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that we have so many of these moments where we end up standing for long periods. So Pope Francis was here in 2015, and the way we set up was sort of backwards on the White House lawn. For some reason, they had flipped things around, so we were like on the opposite side from where we normally were. And I ended up on, like how when you have like a small tree, if you take mulch and you sort of build it up around the base of the trunk, so there's like a little dome. Yep. And somehow I ended up like on this, next to this tree, like standing on this incline.
Where one foot's higher than the other?
Yes, and it was absolutely the worst. Like, and he was late. They were late. Who knows? There were like all kind of protesters downtown, and
the Pope mobile was dragging.
The Pope and the president were late arriving, so we had to just stand there. And that's probably the only time I was ever actually worried that I was going to like fall out, like, because it was an hour plus, and my foot, like one of my feet, had fallen asleep. So I try, you do what you can. You try to move, just discreetly
within your pant leg.
Yeah, you're wiggling your toes and all that, but it was not fun. So you never know when that kind of stuff's going to happen. So
Woo. Rough.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have you come back on with us and like talk about some of this stuff, like break it down, like I don't know, do a reaction to some of this old guard fife and stuff, because it is very fascinating. And the cold attacks are aplenty.
Oh man, that's the most. Not only the standing and attention stuff is wild, but like the music you guys play and play it as clean as you do. And I'm sure the audition, you're not going to get into that group if you're not a really good snare drummer or just drummer for whatever drum you're playing. But it's always blown my mind. I've seen you all. I don't know if you were in it yet when I did see you all live, but it's been wild. It was so cool to watch. So.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and that's one of the things I've really loved about being in the group too, is just really having an appreciation for how huge drumming is on an international scale. Like we kind of put the blinders on, and we of course love DCI and eat that up, but all these other countries have these traditions of rudimental drumming. The Swiss, you think about like
some of that stuff.
All the history of the Swiss drumming, and then that was passed to the French, and then the French, and then the British pick it up because they're fighting the French, and they're like, oh, well, but their drummers are pretty good, and so they copy it, and then somehow it makes its way over to us hundreds of years later, and
we can't be outdone.
Yeah, and just the fact too that in other countries there's no age out rule. So, like, they don't do the competitive thing as well as we do in America. Like, there's no circuit like DCI or WGI that's, like, just as the pinnacle of competitive drumming, right? But there's more of a culture. Like, there's not you're not going to be considered a master drummer at 22 or 23, and then you just put the sticks down and walk away. Like, you're just getting started. Like, in Switzerland, you're still a junior drummer at 22. Yeah. They're like, no, you don't know anything, So
that's funny.
Awesome. But yeah, we will definitely have you back on. I think we had said before we started that we can do like a double whammy like reaction video with you and do maybe some scouts or something. And
yeah, I would love that.
Do some scouts for half of it, and then some old guard stuff for the other half, and or we can do 2 different ones. I don't really care. It works for us either way. But
we're just loving doing it. So
yeah. So Evan, you got anything else for him? I think it's been I think it's like an hour and 11 minutes now or something. I think I'm seeing.
I'm good, but if Jeff, if you have anything you want to shout out before we wrap up, we'll give you the floor.
Yeah.
No, well, thanks to both of you for having me on. I mean, I really appreciate it. It's certainly a fan of all the content that you've been creating, and just really proud to be a part of the culture. I'm such a huge fan of drum corps, and for me, just to be an adjudicator and to be on the field with all of these exceptional young people and these groups, it really fills my tank. I mean, I live for those moments, and I feel like whatever else happens in my life, I can always be proud of the time that I have been able to be on the field as both a member and as a judge, as a staff member. Just so proud of what everyone's doing, So that's really my big takeaway from all of it. It's just I'm proud of the activity. I'm proud of the members, and just proud to be a part of it because it's meant so much to me, just personally and professionally over the years.
Dude, heck yeah. Cheers to that, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Well, I don't know of a better way to end it than that, so we'll just, real quick, Lone Star Percussion, discount codes in the YouTube videos. You guys, if you don't know it, it's aged out. Facebook, Instagram, head over to patreon.com if you want to support us financially at all. I don't think we did Lone Star, social media. I think that's it.
Rocked it.
I think we're good. All right. We will see everybody in the next one. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.